Have you ever looked at an empty space in your kitchen and thought to yourself, I could fit something there? If the answer is no, you are probably not a woman. Here, I will show you how to make a custom turntable with a Cricut or similar machine to fill that empty space. The first thing you're going to want to do is go on Pinterest or Google to find inspiration pictures as to what you want your Lazy Susan turntable to look like. There's many different options. You can either paint, stain, or leave the wood how it is. So in this project, the person left the board how it was and put the design over. They also painted the turntable and put the design over that. You can scroll down and you can see other options like this, where the person painted part of the board and put the design over that and stained the rest of it, leaving the natural wood look to it. For this project, the person decided to leave a weathered look to the board by partially painting over it, watering down the paint to give it the weathered old look. Now on Google, it's the same thing where you find similar pictures as to the projects and what they look like. On this one, the person decided to use the vinyl to cover the part that they wanted to leave the wood and painted the rest and pulled the vinyl off. If you keep scrolling down, you find more inspiration pictures as to what a lot of people like to do. The natural look is what most people go for. This is what I'm going for this project. Simple and easy, and it's quite beautiful. Now, as you can see, the price is quite high. I plan to make it for much cheaper than that, and my Lazy Susan will be 4 inches bigger than this one is. So I already went ahead and designed up what I planned for this to look like, and this is what I have. The gray background is the overall size of the Lazy Susan that I have. The brown part is the handles that I plan to put on, and the white part is the total design space that I want to use. Now I'll go into Cricut and I will show you how I designed this. It does take a minute sometimes for it to load, so bear with me. So once the app loads, I'll go to the upper right corner and I'll hit New Project, and that will open up my design space where I can create what I want. So first I'll add in the Lazy Susan turntable and make that gray. I'll make it to the size that I need it to be, which is 22 by 22. I'll zoom out because it's quite large. It doesn't fit on the full screen right away. I'll add the second circle, which will be the design space, and I'll make that white. And this needs to be 18 by 18, so I have a 4-inch diameter all the way around where there will be no design. And then I'll go ahead and I'll add the last thing, which is the handles, and I'll make that down to size, which they're about 5.5 inches by 0.625 inches. And once I get it to size, I'll duplicate it so I have the exact one and I don't have to go through that process all over again. Now I'll look at the design and I see that I have a nice leaf vine, so I'll go into Google and see if I can find a similar picture as to what I want. Now sometimes you can find something quite easily and sometimes you can't, and you want to make sure that you don't find something too complicated like this, because that is horrible to cut out and it's horrible to try to weed. This is also way too much and it's not exactly what I'm going for. This is too simple for what I want, so I'll keep looking, and this is nice, but not exactly what I want either. Now this is nice as well, but the curve won't fit on my Lazy Susan quite properly because I can't adjust the curve on an image. So now I'll go more towards floral, and as you can see, there's still a lot of stuff that is too much detail. It will be too hard for me to cut and weed out, and I know that it would frustrate me, and I don't want to do that. So I'll continue looking for a little bit, but I did decide to go ahead and buy this, which is 100 floral wreaths, and I know that I'll use them sooner or later, so I just decided to go ahead and buy that. So I'll go back into my design space, I'll go into upload, and I'll look through my files. Through the ones that I just downloaded, I have 100 different ones to choose from, and this is half of the ones that I got. A lot of floral, a lot of beautiful things. I wanted something simple, not too hard, and something that would just look elegant. And I went along and I decided to go with this one. Now I'll click to make it moderately complex so then it will get the full design. And to get this how I want, it will be too big to cut it as a whole thing, so I have to erase half of it. And I'll start by going by one dot and going to the other side to the start of the other dots to make sure that I have the full image. I have to make sure that I erase everything, so I go slowly and carefully. If I do not, it will pick up what I didn't erase and it will put it into my design, and I don't want that. So now that that's done, I will continue and hit cut image and finish, and then I will upload it into the design space and get it on my screen. It does come out quite large, so I have to size it down. But first I will take it over here and I will duplicate it. I need to flip it both horizontally and vertically to get it exactly how I need it. And I will line it up the best that I can and make it look as good as I want. Once I have it in the spot that I want it, I will attach these two together by grouping them. So then when I move one, the other will move as well. And when I size one down, the other will size down at the same time. I'll put it over my design and I'll start sizing it down to about where I want it, and then I'll zoom back in so I can make sure that I have it exactly where I would like it. And with the final adjustments, I have it about where I would like it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a rough estimate as to what I would like it to look like. I will now add in the first set of text, which is, some call it chaos, we call it family. And with this, I would like it to be curved around by the dots on both the left side and the right side of the turntable. So now that I have it written out, I will go through the process of finding a font that I like, which is never easy because you have so many different choices to choose from. This can be easily one of the most time-consuming steps because you have so many choices. Now, if there's no fonts in there that I like, I can go to a site called defonts.com, and they have a lot of different free fonts that I can download. The font that I would like is actually on the Cricut, but I'll show you how you download one of these. You hit download and it starts downloading, and once it's done, you click on it and you go into the file and extract it, and then you install it onto the computer. To be able to use it, you usually have to close the Cricut Design Space app and reopen it. And this is the font that I'm going for, something script and cursive, which is always a nice font and it looks great. Now I'll start getting it bigger and sizing it up to about what I think I want it to be. And once I get it to the about size I would like, I'll start adding a curve to make sure that it curves with the turntable. And now I have to start rotating it so then it curves along on the side that I would like. This is also a time-consuming step to get it exactly how you want it, because every little move that you make can change the design completely. So after a few times going through the curvature and the rotation of my design, I'll find that I have it exactly where I want it. Here I tried to change the font by typing in the number I would like, and I typed in too many numbers and it got huge. So I had to hit the undo button a few times to get it back where I want it. And now I'll do the same with We Call It Family. I have to be careful where I place it because I don't want it touching the other design, as it will print like that, and I want a nice clean, crisp line. I do want both fonts to be the same size, so I will double check that a few times to make sure that I'm not making it any bigger than I need. When I curved these words, the letters decided to space out too far, giving it a not so cursive look, so I have to ungroup all of the letters and zoom in closely so I can see that I have them where I need them, and start manually dragging them to touching each other. With moving them closer together, I have to make more adjustments to get the curve and the rotation of the wording where I would like it. Before I do any of that, I want to click all of the letters and regroup them together, so when I decide to move one, I move them all. I'll zoom back out so we can see the whole image and start moving it around again. Now that I have that where I want it, I'll add in the next set of text, which is the Jaguar family. The word the and family will be the same font, as some call it chaos and we call it family, and the Jaguar family will be the only one that is different. I'll get these written out and placed about where I would like them, and get Jaguar written out as well, and find the font that I would like to use for that. Once I have them all written out, I'll start sizing them and getting them to look how I would like. To add a line through the middle, I will add another square shape and get it to the size that I want it. It's quite small and thin, about 0.25 inches, and each length is different. So I'll start by getting it to the size that I want, and then flipping it 90 degrees to get it laying horizontally. I realized here that the size was too big yet, so I went back in and I continued making it smaller until it was the size that I liked it. I like to work closer to my project to make sure that I have everything exactly where I would like it. With this, I'll just duplicate the line so it's the exact width that I would like it to be, and continue putting it through the word family. I don't want it overlapping the wording. I want it next to it to make it look like an outline around it. Because these lines are so small, it's hard to manually make adjustments, so I'll enter in numbers, which is a trial and error thing, to get it the exact size that I would like it. I realized here that my first line was too far down, making my second line too close to the eye. So I had to move that one up and make it longer. I'll repeat the process to duplicate the same line so I don't have to mess with the width, only the length. Once I have my design exactly how I would like it, I click on everything to get it black. For some reason, my Cricut makes everything that I'm making gray. For this step, I'll take my time and make sure that I click on everything to make sure that it's all black. To make sure I don't miss anything, I look on the right of my screen that tells me everything that I have on my mat. I'll click on the things that are actually the design, not the background, and make sure that it is all attached together. So I can move it off of the mock turntable to see my whole design. Now I'll delete the mock turntable that I made because my Cricut doesn't allow for me to cut those types of things. Now I will ungroup all of the things that I have grouped together and start at the base. As you can see, I move my design around to make sure that I have everything ungrouped before I start regrouping the things that I want cut together. Sometimes the Cricut design space can be a little finicky and hard to work with, and you have to be patient and be able to work around small challenges. Once I make sure there is nothing grouped together, I will start grouping the things how I would like them cut. So here I attached the top part of the circle design with some call it chaos. I group those together, and I'll do the same with the bottom and group the bottom floral design with we call it family. I will then group together the Jaguar family wording and the line that goes through the entire Lazy Susan. Once I have each group set up, I will then attach it to each other. Without doing this step, you have issues when you go to the sticky mat, as it puts your design to use the least amount of space and the least amount of vinyl that you can. Once it's all done, I hit make it, and it will give me the design sample on the sticky mat boards that I have. I will then move them around to make sure that it's not too close to the top or the sides, so I don't have to worry about not cutting my vinyl the exact size that I need it. Once I have each design where I'd like it on the Cricut mat, I'll hit continue, which will take me to this screen. This is the screen that I'll use to cut my vinyl. Now that I have my stencil all made up, I will get it ready to cut. So first I use a white permanent vinyl, and that's what it looks like. I have my scissors and my sticky mat ready to go as well. So I will lay it out, and I need to cut 3 sheets, 2 at 17 and 1 at 15. So I'll measure it out, get it down to where I need it, and cut down one of the lines. I usually go after, not before, so I always cut extra to make sure that I don't have to worry about running out. I was halfway through cutting when I realized I didn't have enough vinyl, so I had to stop the project and make a run to town to go get some more. This was the moment I realized I didn't have enough vinyl. Once I have my vinyl all cut out, I'll take off the plastic sheet that protects the sticky mat and place the first piece of vinyl that I'm going to be cutting down. I line it up with one of the edges very carefully to make sure that I have it exactly where I need it, and lay it down as flat as I can. I'll then take a tool to make sure that there's no excess bubbles or anything stuck underneath the mat. Here I pulled back the vinyl because I realized there was a hair sticking to my mat and I didn't want it stuck there. Once my vinyl is completely flat on my sticky mat, I'll go into my laptop into the Cricut Design Space and get ready to start cutting my vinyl. On this screen, it shows that my Cricut is attached to my laptop and will bring me all the settings that my Cricut has. So I'll make sure that it's set to vinyl because that's what I'm cutting, and it'll tell me the tools that I need, which is a fine point blade that's already installed on my Cricut. This is the Cricut itself. It's quite small and doesn't take up much space. On the far left of the Cricut, you can see a blinking light, and that's to help me load it in. So I'll make sure that I'm underneath the little grabbers and push the button, and that will pull my mat into the Cricut. Once I do this on my computer, it'll give me the option to cut, and I'll hit the C button on my Cricut and it will begin cutting. This can take anywhere from 2 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the size of what I'm cutting. I just make sure that my vinyl stays stuck to my sticky mat and make sure it doesn't peel up because that can cause issues. Once the Cricut is done with the process of cutting the vinyl, it will take the mat to the original position that it was in, and I can unload it by hitting the same button that I used to load it. I didn't record the process of me taking the vinyl off very well, as I didn't realize that I wasn't on the screen. But here I'm pulling up the vinyl off my Cricut mat very carefully and slowly so I don't cause any bubbles underneath the vinyl in between the backing. I'll then take my next sheet of pre-cut vinyl and stick it to my sticky mat and begin the same process of cutting. These mats tend to be very sticky, and if the vinyl gets stuck down where you don't want it, all you have to do is peel it back up and place it back down where you would like it. With my vinyl cut and my stencil cut into the vinyl, I'll take my bright pad and lay my vinyl over it. This helps to see the parts that I'm trying to weed out and the parts that I'm trying to leave in. So I'll start by putting my weeding tool on a corner and pulling up on the vinyl. I'll make sure to go slow to not remove any of the stencil that I'd like to stay there. This can become a very tedious process as you have to go slow, because if you don't, you will remove part of the stencil that you want to stay there. Once I have the major piece of background removed, I will then take my weeding tool to remove all the fine pieces in between the lettering. Once I have all the pieces removed, I'll look over my whole stencil all over again to make sure I have everything removed that's not supposed to be there. I'll then repeat the process with the next piece of vinyl that I already have cut. This part of the stencil is a little more tedious to do as it has a lot more parts that I have to weed out with my weeding tool. I remember to take my time and look over the stencil periodically to make sure I'm removing everything that is not supposed to stay. Once my stencils are completely weeded out, I'll then lay them down on the table flat and put a piece of transfer tape over the top of it. This is so I can remove it from the backing that it's attached to place it on my Lazy Susan turntable. I have to be very careful with this process as I have to make sure that it's completely flat or I'll have bubbles, and that makes it hard to get it to stick to what I need it to, and it can cause wrinkles in my stencil. When I have my transfer tape on my stencil, I'll make sure to use my tool to get all the bubbles out. And then I'll trim off all the excess sides that I don't need there to give myself a smaller piece of transfer tape to work with to get my stencil onto my Lazy Susan. With my first stencil ready to go onto my Lazy Susan, I'll take the next one that I have cut out and I'll do the same process, making sure that there's no bubbles underneath the transfer tape. And making sure to cut all the excess pieces off to make it as small as I need it, which makes it easier to work with. After running to the store, I got my third stencil cut and weeded, and after that I attached the two outer parts and made them look like this. As you can tell, it was a different vinyl, but that's fine. So once I had them attached to one another, I started peeling back the transfer tape slowly to make sure that I got the complete stencil off of the backing. This can be quite tedious and take some time and patience, but if you go slow enough, there isn't much to worry about. There are a few spots that decided not to stick to the transfer tape and stayed stuck to the backing. So to remove that, I fold the backing a little bit to make the stencil pop up and stick to the transfer tape. Once the stencil is completely removed from the backing, I start to line up where I want it on my Lazy Susan. This tends to be easier with two people, but I was working by myself, so I try to get it exactly where I would like it. And the first time that I got it partially stuck down, I realized that it wasn't centered or where I wanted it at all. So I needed to slowly remove off the stencil from the Lazy Susan and try and keep it stuck to the transfer tape, which was most definitely not easy, but I was able to do it after a lot of trial and error. Once I got the stencil completely removed off of the Lazy Susan and back onto the transfer tape, I tried to reposition it. And again, with a lot of trial and error, it took me quite some time to get it placed where I wanted it. As you can see here, I wasn't completely satisfied where I had my stencil, but I had pushed it down too far and I was unable to remove it from the Lazy Susan. It wasn't exactly centered and exactly where I wanted it, but it's hard to tell that it's not completely centered, and I figured that it was easier to just let it stay instead of taking it off and redoing the whole process of cutting and weeding and all of the other stuff all over again. Since I decided that I was happy with where it was at, I used my scraping tool to remove all of the excess bubbles and make sure that I pushed down as hard as I could on the vinyl to try and get it to stick as best I could to the Lazy Susan. After I scraped for a while, I decided it was time to pull off the transfer tape, which is also another tedious process, where I had to go slow enough to make sure that the stencil was sticking to the Lazy Susan, and if it did get stuck to the transfer tape, I had to make sure to try and get it to stick to the Lazy Susan. I was successful and I didn't lose any pieces, which is also very satisfying. Now that the transfer tape is completely removed, I decided to see how it looked with the handles. I looked over my table and realized they weren't there, and noticed my daughter was playing with them under the table, so I had to grab those from her. I placed them on the sides about where I want them to see what it will look like. With the outside done and on the Lazy Susan, it's time to add in the middle wording. So again, I pull off the backing off of the transfer tape and the stencil, and it was easier this time because there wasn't as many details and it was all just a simple cut. So I try and get it in the middle, trial and error. As I said before, it's a lot easier with two people to do stuff like this. After trying to line it up a couple times, I realized that my transfer tape was too big and it was going to get stuck to my other stencil that was already on the Lazy Susan. So I cut down my transfer tape to make sure that I wouldn't pull anything up on accident. You can't see, but off screen I have my laptop open and my design laid out so I can see where I need to place this. And I tried by lining up by the leaf that it was supposed to be by, and I also tried by putting it by the dot that it's supposed to be by. It did take me quite some time to be able to do this, but with trial and error, as always, I got it. Here you can see that I thought that I had it in a good spot, and I didn't realize that the bottom F of the family was touching the flower on the bottom of my outside design. But I went ahead and I cut this little piece off because I thought it was fine until I realized where it was. So I had to take it off and reposition it once again. And once I got it where it was, I took the little piece that I cut off and I laid it on next to that line that it was supposed to be by in the first place. With that piece back in place and where I needed it to be, I used my scraper tool once again to flatten out my transfer tape and make sure that my stencil was sticking to my Lazy Susan. I then removed the transfer tape and left the design on the Lazy Susan. I grabbed the other scraper tool that I have because it doesn't have any felt on it and it has less risk of pulling off my stencil. And I just went over the stencil and made sure that it was flat and where I needed it to be. With my stencil in place, it's time to put a coat of polyurethane over the whole thing. This is to protect my stencil from coming off in use over the years and to make it look nice. It gives the wood a nice shiny finish and it protects it from wear and tear. I make sure to apply a generous amount of polyurethane to make sure that it coats the entire thing. I let it dry for about 25 minutes once I was done, and I put a second layer on just to make sure, and I let it dry overnight before putting the handles on. After letting my project dry overnight, I took it over to my friend's house because I had the improper tools to drill the holes for my handles. I bought ones that needed the screw to go through the bottom of the board instead of through the top, and that was my own fault without looking at what I bought before I bought it. So I headed over there, and I didn't record the process of him measuring out everything as to where it needed to go. But it did take him quite some time to do that because he wanted to make sure that it looked nice and everything was even. So after he measured it out, we started by drilling through the top of the Lazy Susan turntable to make sure that there was no excess that came through the top that would make the handles not sit flush. So here you can see him drilling the 4 holes, 2 on each side for each handle. And then he went to the back and started countersinking the holes because the bolts were a little bit too long for my Lazy Susan and the handle itself. He then realized that it would be easier to counterbore the holes instead of countersinking, which means that instead of leaving a triangle shape in the back of the board, it will leave a flat shape, so then the bolt itself would be completely flat. After he did this, the bolts were a little bit too long and they needed to be grinded down, so he did that off camera as well. And here he's making sure that after putting the bolts through the back of the board to the top, that they lined up with the handle. And they did, which was great. So then we continued with making sure that the holes were big enough and deep enough and the nails were not too long to hold the handles on. Thankfully, like me, my friend is a perfectionist and likes things to be proper and look nice. So when he went to measure out where everything needed to be, he found the center of the board first and then measured 1.5 inches from each side to make sure that they would be the same distance away from the side of the board. Even though the stencil isn't perfectly centered with the board, it turned out absolutely stunning. After countersinking and counterboring all of the holes and making sure that all the screws were the proper size to make sure that they fit in the board and in the handle as well, we went ahead and we screwed them in for the last time and flipped it over and made sure that everything looked the way it should. And this is the final result as to what it looked like. Thanks for watching this video of how to make a Lazy Susan turntable. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed the time. It can be a very tedious and long process doing this, but in the end, you save a lot of money, and if you enjoy crafting as much as I do, this turns out to be a great project, and when you see the final result, it makes you feel absolutely amazing.